I will explain the process from the Russo-Japanese War to the Pacific War. In the previous issue, I explained the Siberian Expedition and the Washington Conference. In this article I will explain the Imperial Army. Factional conflicts in the army during the Showa period are quite complicated. Therefore, in this article I will begin with a brief explanation of the origins of the Imperial Army. The leaders of the new government that successfully brought about the Meiji Restoration also established a conscription system and trained leaders to unite them. These were the Military Academy and the Military University. The Military Academy was a school for training cadets, and the Military College was a school for training general staff officers who would plan the Army's operations. The Army adopted the Prussian military style, which strongly reflected German military organization. The Imperial Army was divided into 3 divisions: the War Ministry, the General Staff, and the Office of the Superintendent General of Education, which also adopted the German style. The Supreme Commander of the Army and Navy was the Emperor, who was to have the highest military rank of Grand Marshal. Since the establishment of the Meiji government, the military power was dominated by those from Satsuma and Choshu. As I have explained in my past videos, the leaders of the Russo-Japanese War were almost exclusively samurai from Satsuma and Choshu. They were supported by the elite from army universities as their chiefs of staff. At the time of its establishment, the Military Academy was not a very popular school and did not have a high ratio of students. However, the Military Academy was exempt from tuition fees and was one of the few schools where families with limited financial resources could study academics. Although Japan had become an equal society, it was a time when only upper-class children from families could go to college. Yoshifuru Akiyama, who played an active role in the Russo-Japanese War, applied to the Military Academy for financial reasons. After the Russo-Japanese War, when Japan became a military state, it became a kind of social status to go to a military academy. Those who were able to enter military academies were the pride of their hometown junior high schools and high schools. In this way, the competitive ratio for military academies rose dramatically. The military academy became as difficult as entering Tokyo Imperial University, Japan's highest academic institution. The military college, which was to be followed by the military academy for the elite of the elite to train general staffs, accepts only about 60 applicants a year. To enter this school, a student must have graduated from the military academy, have served in the armed forces, and be recommended by the head of his military unit to be eligible to take the examination. Those who reach the rank of captain are disqualified from taking the examination. Those who graduate from military college in the top 6 are given a military sword by the emperor at their graduation ceremony. The Japanese military is an academic society, and most of the graduates with excellent grades were promoted to the rank of lieutenant general or general. Compared to other countries where aristocrats dominate the officer ranks, this area seems to have been a very equal society. Graduates of military college, even if they did not rank in the top 6, were guaranteed to work at the heart of the military. However, the academic nature of the military also instilled an excessive sense of elitism in the upper echelons of the military. In the early Showa period, the military became completely bureaucratized. No longer were the generals of the Russo-Japanese War the same kind of up-and-coming military officers who had been trained by the military. This bureaucratization of the military also created new problems. Military college graduates, who were elite bureaucratic military officers, grew increasingly dissatisfied with a certain situation. That is, the top posts of Minister of War, Chief of Staff, and Superintendent of Education were dominated by men from Choshu and Satsuma. Let me introduce you to one man. His name is Tetsuya Nagata. He graduated second in his class from the Military Academy in 1910, and was a brilliant man with such a promising future in the army that it was said, "There was no Nagata before Nagata, and there will be no Nagata after Nagata." Nagata had served as a resident military officer in various European countries during World War I and had witnessed the world's first all-out war. From that experience, he feared that the next war would be so great that it would require the mobilization of the entire nation, and that Japan today was not prepared for it. He praised Germany for its excellent youth education for war, which made possible the rapid mobilization of German soldiers and the high level of cooperation of the people in the war. Upon his return to Japan, he became a central figure in promoting military education, drawing on German national education. In 1921, when he was a military officer stationed in Switzerland, he pledged with Toshiro Obata and Yasuji Okamura in Baden-Baden, Germany, to modernize the army, reform the military system, and reform the personnel of the Taisho faction, etc. Factional strife in the army in the 1920s and 1930s began with Nagata's movements. In the 1910s, Japan was enjoying an unprecedented wartime economic boom as Europe fought in World War I. However, by 1920, all European countries were ready for post-war reconstruction, and Japan was in a recession due to excessive capital investment and production. This recession would last for a long time, and the Great Depression, beginning in 1929, would plunge the country into an even greater recession. The London Naval Disarmament Treaty led to the disarmament of the Navy, which in turn led to the disarmament of the Army. This is the so-called Agaki disarmament. Minister of War Kazushi Jigaki reduced the number of divisions by 4 and laid off 90,000 military personnel. He decided to use the money saved on personnel costs to modernize the army. This reduction plan was carried out by Tetsuya Nagata, who was concerned about the outdated military equipment compared to Europe. This disarmament was felt to be a crisis by ordinary young officers who were not members of the elite. Many of the soldiers in the Japanese army were from rural Japan, and many of them were second or third sons who could not take over their parents' families. During the Depression, the soldiers under their command were dismissed and lost their jobs. Furthermore, in 1930, the Great Depression and cold weather hit farmers, especially in the Northeast, and many farmers' daughters sold themselves. These events increased the enthusiasm of young officers from rural areas for the revolution. Their complaints were directed at Agaki, who implemented disarmament, the factions that profited from the sale of weapons, and party politicians. And there was a military man who had their enthusiastic support. He was Sadao Araki. He was the chief of staff of the Siberian contingent during the Siberian exodus of 1918. He became anti-Soviet and anti-communist when he saw the fanatical strength and ironclad unity of the Red Army. And he was an advocate of war against the Soviet Union, saying that the Far East should be occupied and brought under Japanese control while the Soviets had not yet gained strength. He idealized Japan during the Russo-Japanese War and believed that returning Japan to that state would be a shortcut to strengthening Japan's military and achieving war against the Soviet Union as soon as possible. For this purpose, he insisted that the emperor's schemers, such as Agaki, should be defeated and a pro-emperor government should be implemented. This was the so-called Showa Restoration. Young officers were fascinated by this theory in Araki. It was a radical group that was willing to use terror and force to achieve its goals. Thus, the faction led by Araki and supported by ordinary young officers became a group known as the Imperial Way faction. Tetsuya Nagata, on the other hand, wanted to legally change the military and the Japanese government. He rejected revolution by force. Nagata and a group of elite officers who had graduated from military college with excellent grades were known as the Control Faction. Thus, an internal struggle involving structural conflicts in the academic society unfolded within the army. Among them was the enthusiasm for revolution among young officers from rural areas who were concerned about the corruption of Japanese party politics and the devastation of rural areas. In the next issue, I will explain the history of the struggle within the army between the Imperial Way faction and the Control faction. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our channel and press the like button.